All right, we're going to get going. Thanks everybody for joining. I want to see a raise of hand of everybody who is singing along with our favorite John Bon Jovi. Love it. You guys are so funny. Oh my gosh, so great. Okay, we're going to get going here. Thanks for joining. This is the Society of Thoracic Surgeons Adult Cardiac User Group call for December 15th. On the line with me from STS, I have Leanne Jones, Sydney Clinton, Emily Conrad, and Melinda Offer. And from IQVIA, we have Jean, Joe, and Steve. So thanks everybody for joining. And we have a nice group today. Almost 300 folks have joined on. Just quick run through of the agenda. STS updates, IQVIA updates. Melinda's going to provide some education on TAVR gone bad, and then user feedback. If you are submitting a question regarding a case that you have opened with IQVIA, if you wouldn't mind including a ticket or case number so they can check into it. And of course, if you'd like to raise your hand and speak to us, you can do that. Just make sure you have microphone on your computer. Important dates. Today's December 15th, and we are having our 2 p.m. Central user group call. Harvest closes on Friday, and that's going to contain OR dates through September 30th of 2021. Opt-out will be December 21st. January 19th is our next webinar. That will be a user group call at 2 p.m. Central. February 2nd is our monthly webinar. February 25th, Harvest 1 closes OR dates through December 31st. Make sure you are, hopefully people are getting used to using the open submission for your data to be updated throughout more concurrently as the days move on. So we can, when we get to Harvest Close 1, it's not a big push to get the end of year data in. So be sure to take advantage of that open submission as best you can, and hopefully it works out. And then March 1st, opt out for Harvest 1. So that will be our next star rating report. Harvest 3 star ratings went out. I believe they went out last Monday, and you should have them in your IQVIA dashboard, in your IQVIA platform under the risk adjusted dashboard. A couple updates here from STS, advances in quality and outcomes. Probably most folks on this call attended AQO this year or signed up for it and watched the presentations after. Make sure that you claim your CEs by January 15th, and you can do so by clicking by this link here, www.coreexcel.com/STS/. And if you have already completed your evaluation, certifications will be coming soon. I completed mine right after AQO, and I have already received it. So if you've submitted them recently, they'll be coming soon to you. Harvest closes Friday, OR dates through 9:30, and then a COVID update. We had a call with our surgeon leaders earlier this week, and it was decided that starting with OR dates of January 1st, 2022, we will no longer be excluding any COVID positive patients. The thought from the surgeon leaders was that the environment has changed enough at hospitals, enough people are vaccinated where maybe they're not as sick, and that we are capturing the very sick patients' risk within the database already. So we will no longer be excluding those cases as of January 1st, which means they will not be excluded from analysis, starting with those OR dates. But we would like you to continue to collect those COVID variables until further notice. We still want, the surgeon leaders still want to look at those a little bit more closely, get some more data on that for future projects. So you could continue collecting those variables until further notice. Okay, and then I am going to hand it over to Joe for the IQVIA update. Joe.
Great, thank you, Carol. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's go ahead and get started. The following items are scheduled to be released in an update this weekend on December 18th, starting with some fixes for the participant dashboard report. That is the non-analyzed report. That is STS 6747. When reviewing the participant dashboard, users were finding one value displayed in the online report and then a different value displayed on the same report when it was exported to Excel. So we did identify the cause of that issue, and that fix will be coming on the 18th. And then STS 7175, similar to the item I just went over, the same issue is impacting the export of the graph data from the participant dashboard as well. So the values displayed for the graphs in the online report are similarly different from those same graphs when exported to Excel, and the cause was identified to be the same, and so both of those items will be corrected. STS 7173, attempting to select multiple rows on the participant dashboard currently generates an error and does not work as expected. That will also be resolved on the 18th, so that once that fix goes through, you can once again select multiple rows in the participant dashboard. In regard to the missing variable report, STS 7194, the surgical site infection is not currently being flagged when missing on the MVR. And so the update this weekend will update the report logic so that that item is correctly flagged. Then last one on this slide is the longitudinal report, STS 7542. There's currently an issue with the longitudinal dashboard report with regard to the length of stay metrics, where the percentages on the y-axis are greater than 100% for 2017-2018 calculations in the cumulative data set. So that's the option where you select data from all harvests to be combined, and the report calculations will be updated to correct that. All right, next slide. And these items also scheduled for the 18th, all in regard to the risk adjusted report, starting with STS 7677. In the most recent harvest report, there is a scroll bar impacting the display of the quality ratings report. That's where you see your star ratings, and that's causing the results to appear to be misaligned. If you scroll to the top of the report, everything should line up, but what it's doing is defaulting to the bottom. It shouldn't have to scroll at all, but there, for some reason, there is a scroll bar popping up and it's going to the bottom of the page. And if you scroll up to the top, it should line everything back up for you. That will be fixed this weekend. STS 6706, there's currently an inconsistency with the display for the attending anesthesiologist medically directing CRNA variables under the care team model section of the anesthesia report. The my site values in that section are not pulling in the data that they should be, and so that will be fixed this weekend. STS 7008, there was a slight discrepancy between the observed rate for any major complication, deep sternal infection, and prolonged ventilation on the risk-adjusted and regional outcomes reports when you compare that against what's displayed in the benchmark reports for the AVR and plus cabbage due to a rounding issue. So that rounding issue will be corrected so that those items will align across those two reports. STS 7183, the blood products calculations and the benchmark reports for 2020 have been updated to remove the intra-op blood products refused parent field, as that is no longer applicable in version 4.20.2. And then finally, STS 7246, when looking at the infection complications on the benchmark reports under morbidity mortality, no data is being displayed for light group or STS aggregate for deep sternal infection, mediastinitis, and conduit harvest or cannulation site lines. So the cause of that issue was identified, and that will be fixed in this weekend's release as well.
Thanks, Joe.
Sure
There are a couple other things that sites have brought up that we are working with Melanie and her team on as well. So if they're not listed on this list, know that we have been in contact. We've been having discussions with Melanie and her team, and they are being currently investigated. There's just no fix in place yet for them.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you. STS, the IQVIA support plan. I think you're all fairly familiar with this. And just various links if you need them. A phone support number and the STS tech support at IQVIA.com. And now I'm going to hand it over to Miss Melinda Offer, who's going to take us through capturing of the deteriorating patient. Melinda?
Welcome, everybody. I actually did this presentation 2 years ago. Well, Dr. Whitman and I did the presentation 2 years ago. but I get enough questions in the mailbox about this, so I thought we would just review it for everybody. So here's the scenario. The patient presented for an elective TAVR. Once the TAVR valve was deployed and seated, there was a significant amount of paravalvular leak. A decision was made to perform a balloon valvuloplasty. During the valvuloplasty, the valve appeared to migrate out of the aortic annulus into the LV outflow tract. During this time, the patient appeared to have significant ischemic changes, as well as a sudden drop in blood pressure. Echo demonstrated severely reduced left ventricular function. The surgical team was mobilized. The patient's blood pressure continued to deteriorate, and ACLS measures were undertaken, including chest compressions. While the patient was receiving chest compressions, a rapid incision was made into the chest for emergent sternotomy. So when we look at this scenario, we need to ask ourselves, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the index procedure? And is it planned or unplanned in this situation? So the answer is that the SAVR is the index procedure, because TAVRs are optional to enter into the STS database. So in this situation, the SAVR is the index procedure. The TAVR is going to be captured as a prior CV intervention. Now, is the SAVR planned or unplanned? And the answer is it's planned. Being caught off guard prior to the incision, but having to do a procedure emergently does not prevent the procedure from being planned. So once the TAVR went bad, then they plan to do the AVR, the SAVR. So it's really no different from a patient who comes in with an emergent aortic dissection, and they plan to emergently take the patient to the OR and fix the dissection. So we'd say valve procedure, yes. Aortic valve procedure, yes. And the procedure, and there's no procedure on the aorta if we were filling out the data collection form. So how do we code the TAVR? Because a lot of people still enter TAVRs into the STS database. But in this particular situation, if you're one of those sites that normally enters them, they're optional cases, then you are to capture the TAVR as a prior CV intervention, because it's optional to enter into STS. It's not a required case. The SAVR is a required case. So the TAVR is a prior CV intervention. And also you can capture the balloon valvuloplasty as a prior CV intervention. So what about cardiogenic shock and resuscitation? And we'll start with cardiogenic shock first, and then we'll go to resuscitation. So when you look at the training manual, the definition of cardiogenic shock and resuscitation is developed prior to induction. However, this is a unique situation, and we have some language in the training manual that states if a patient is having a non-cardiac procedure or a non-required procedure, such as a TAVR, if they're having a CEA or a Watchman or ICD, they develop shock, they need resuscitation, surgeons called in, then we have language in the training manual that allows you to code the shock and the resuscitation after induction. So in the next slide, we look at this. So this patient was arresting and was requiring CPR. So yes, at the time of the SAVR, this patient was in cardiogenic shock. So we would code that as yes at the time of the procedure. Likewise, on the next slide, patient also is requiring CPR. So we are actively resuscitating the patient at the start of the SAVR. So that's the key here. You got to kind of think, oh, this TAVR will just happen, it's a prior CV intervention. So don't think about the start of the TAVR. Think about when we're starting the SAVR. And so yes to resuscitation within 1 hour of the procedure. And how would we code incidents? Well, Incidence, as you know, refers to entry into a space, whether it be the pericardial space or the pleural space. In this scenario, the TAVR was on the same day in the same procedure as the SAVR, essentially, right? So that TAVR valve, even though they had gone in and deployed a valve, it was, first of all, it wasn't in the right place. It was in the left ventricular outflow tract. And then second of all, it was very new. So in the training manual now, we do have some language that talks about if you've had a prior TAVR and you're going to have another aortic valve replacement, an operative open one, then you can count it as a first re-op. That's because it takes there's a lot of difficulty in getting a prior TAVR valve out of the aortic position when it's been several years, even 1 year, 8 months, because you have all this scar tissue that's grown around it. So the surgeons actually have to go in there and kind of debride all that and get that valve out. So it does add risk to the procedure. But in this situation, you've got a freshly deployed valve. There's no scar tissue. So in this particular scenario that we're talking about, the SAVR would be coded as first cardiovascular surgery. And which moves us on to talking about operative status. So how would we code operative status in this particular scenario? Well, again, you need to think about what was the status of the patient when you started the SAVR, because that's your index procedure. So at that point, the patient was having CPR. And so with that happening, we can code this patient as emergent salvage because he's undergoing CPR at the time of the start of surgery. The reason, and when it comes to urgent, emergent, or emergent salvage reason, there's really no hierarchy here. So you pick the best reason that fits the scenario, really. So in this particular situation, in my mind, failed transcatheter valve therapy, acute device malposition seems to be the most appropriate emergent salvage reason for this particular procedure to be emergent salvage. So what about, I think operative approach is the next one that we're going to talk about. Yeah, operative approach. So the definition for operative approach is to indicate the initial operative approach. And we have a question about operative approach converted. But in this scenario, our index procedure is the SAVR. So our operative approach for the SAVR is a sternotomy. And we did not convert the operative approach. So you have to just sort of forget that TAVR, forget that percutaneous entry of the TAVR, because the SAVR is your index procedure, and you want to look at the operative approach for that procedure and whether that operative approach was converted. And it wasn't. This procedure was done under a full conventional sternotomy. Talks about OR entry time and incision time. And this is pretty clearly laid out in the training manual, but it really, really depends on your site's process. So some sites will have a separate OR and cath log when this event occurs. And if you have a separate OR and cath log, then it's fairly easy because you can just use your OR entry time and your OR incision time. That's on the OR log time. It gets a little more complicated if you don't have a separate log. Some facilities just continue the cath log and don't start a separate OR log. So if you're one of those sites that does not have a separate log, then the OR entry time is going to be coded the same as the incision for the sternotomy. So they'll be the same time. So the incision for the sternotomy and the OR entry time, if you don't have separate logs, that will be the same time. Anesthesia's next. So how do we code anesthesia in this situation? Because, you know, most TAVRs, a lot of TAVRs aren't under general anesthesia. Some are under procedural sedation. It just depends. But we can't look at that TAVR. We have to think about the SAVR because that's your index procedure. So what type of anesthesia was used for the SAVR? And so we know that general anesthesia is going to be used for the SAVR, and we will answer yes to general anesthesia. And we will answer no to procedural sedation. And just to differentiate those two fields, general anesthesia is coded if general anesthesia is used anytime during the procedure, you code general anesthesia. The only time you ever code procedural sedation is if you've never use it in general anesthesia and you've only used procedural sedation to complete the procedure. Okay, so when this case was sent in, this was the op note, and so this surgeon has said that he performed a TAVR, and he also explanted a transcatheter aortic valve, and he did a surgical AVR. So, but what we have to do is, you know, just because you see it in the op note doesn't mean you code it as a procedure in ACDS. So again, the TAVR, which was his first procedure in his op note, is a prior CV intervention. It's not coded as an operative procedure during this event. The explantation of the transcatheter valve, we are going to code the explant. We'll talk about that in a few more slides. It might actually be the next slide, but it's not going to be other cardiac procedure in this scenario, and I'll go over that too. The surgical AVR, that is your index procedure. So that's what you will be coding. So basically you're going to have an explant of a valve and an AVR.
Linda, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to clarify because I think we get quite a few questions on the first bullet point about the CV intervention, and you did a great job explaining it regarding incidents, how this is not considered, the SAVR is not a first re-op because it was so close to the failed TAVR. I just want to clarify that when Melinda says prior CV intervention, she's talking about where we capture prior CV interventions and to code that TAVR and the annuloplasty there, not to count this as a re-op for incidents.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Right. In the prior CV intervention section. I can't remember, is that 895 or 695? It's one of those 95s,
Yeah.
but
One of those.
under the risk factors.
Thank you.
So how are we going to code this? So aortic valve procedure performed. Yes, it's planned. Remember, we talked about it being planned. They plan to emergently do that SAVR. Yes, they're going to do a replacement. The TAVR field will be no, because that's going to be coded in that prior CV intervention area. And surgical valve replacement, yes. So explant valve surgery, yes or no? So when we read this op note, it says an aortotomy was then performed, intimately attached to the aortic wall with a transcatheter valve. I was able to manipulate the valve frame in order to complete the aortotomy. At this point, the valve was grasped and inspected. In this scenario, the TAVR valve was deployed and it was explanted. And since we coded, excuse me, the TAVR as a prior CV intervention, we need to document the explant of the valve. So we're going to say yes, that we had an explanted valve. It was in the aortic position, and it was a transcatheter valve that was explanted. Okay, and this is the last slide. So we got this question. So would you code that explant of the transcatheter valve as an other cardiac procedure? And the answer in this particular situation is no, because if you'll remember what I just read from the outnote, this valve was retrieved at the time of the aortotomy. So basically they just did the aortotomy for the valve, and oh, there was the valve just sitting there, and they just pulled out the TAVR valve. Now, if this TAVR valve had been found in some other location that required an incision not normally associated with the SAVR, then it would be another cardiac procedure. For example, if the TAVR valve was found in the left ventricle and you had to remove it from there, then yes, we could say that there was an other cardiac procedure. But in this situation, they basically just did the aortotomy and the valve was sitting there. So we're not going to code other cardiac procedure in this particular scenario. So this was a quick overview. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was a good refresher. And I think we're ready to take questions, Carol.
Yeah, thanks, Melinda. That was really great. Doing an awesome job explaining and educating. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
We do have quite a few questions here, and I'm just going to start at the top and then we'll go down. So they might not be relevant to TAVR and SAVR cases right now, but I'm just going to go in order. So some of these questions will be for IQVIA, others I can take, and others I'll hand over to you, Melinda. The first question is from Chris. Chris is asking if you could tell us the percent of participants that fell into the 3-star categories for the most recent report. And we are working on providing that list, and I hope that we can have it provided this week or early next week. I'll check on the status of that and we'll get it posted as soon as we can. Regarding individual reports, have the individual surgeons' reports been published? I do not believe that they have been published yet. I hate to ask if you could just reach out to stsdb@sts.org. I don't have an update on that unless Joe, if you know the answer to that one, but I don't think you do.
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Yeah. That's okay. I think we've been waiting for updates from DCRI, and I know that we've been waiting for a few dates, and I just haven't heard anything with the release of the most recent surgeon report. Next question. Oh, this one I was going to show something on. So let me pull over one of my screens here. Hold on. I wanted to show you where to find this, and I'm glad you brought it up. The question is regarding looking for your percent missingness. So hold on one second here. I'm just going to log into my IQVIA platform quickly, and then I'll pull it over here. And I guess I could get rid of my the red pointer thing. There we go. Okay, so the question is back in the day when we used to send our data to the big university, they notified of the number of patients missing 30-day status by procedure. Now we only get a single number. So I'm going to show you where to find that. It's not in the missing variable report, which is missing variable report's important because that's where you're going to catch all of these cases. But if you want to see it broken down by procedure type, I'll show you where to go. So under operational reports in the participant dashboard, and then you can select the time periods. Because we're using the rolling 12, Cabbage has converted over to the 36-month composite, but we're looking at rolling 12 months for missingness. So for this next report, which is Harvest 4, we're going to look at dates from October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019, and then October 2019 through September 2020, and October 2020 through September 2021. So we're going to look at each of those 12-month periods separately to ensure that we're under that 2%. So the first thing I'm going to do is instead of selecting a reporting period, I'm going to enter a date range, and I'll just start with the first year, the first 12-month period that's in that date range, which is October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019. And then, so that's going to be the first 12 months within that date range. And then I'm going to look at procedures, and I can select all procedures, but I'm interested because I know that the percent missing threshold is applied to each individual procedure type. So first I'm going to start with my isolated cabs, and I'm going to leave this on all patients. The reason I'm going to do that, it's different. Not all sites were collecting the COVID data as intended. They weren't filling out no on all their patients, but not, I shouldn't say that. I think sites were doing the best that they could do with capturing that. But important is that during this time frame, this October 2018 through September 2019, we weren't collecting data on these COVID patients. So I'm going to leave it selected to all patients, because if I select one of these, I'm going to get an incorrect number since we weren't collecting the data at that time. So I'm going to leave it on all patients, and then I'm going to apply parameters. This pulls up this is the participant dashboard, and I'm going to go down here to this discharge mortality tab. So it's just going to take a second to load. So we're under discharge mortality, the number of cases included. This is the isolated cabbages for that time period that I selected, which was October 1st, 2018 through September 30th, 2019. And if I scroll down in this section, this is where I'm going to see my missing and unknown. So this mortality status at 30 days, either discharged or in hospital, missing and unknown is what I want to pay attention to. And then there's also, I know that we audit mortality date. So I have 0% missing here. And I forget the other ones. I think this status at hospital discharge. I forget the three.
Mortality.
This one, MTFD.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to check out my missing here, and if I had any coded as unknown any place. Those are the fields that I would want to check. I can go into to verify. So hold on, I'm going to open this. I know there's a way to open this in another link. There we go. I just right clicked and open page to new window. So that'll load. And then I'm going to go back here just to verify to make sure, because I don't want to give wrong information, under the library and the report overview. It'll open it up in a PDF. And I'm just going to search. I know that MTFD is one. So here are the mortality fields we're looking at are MTDC stat in version 2.81, discharge mort stat in 2.9 and 4.2. So I'm going to look at this field here, this discharge mort stat, to make sure I'm under the 2%, the MT30 stat, and the MT-OPD. So this is the discharge status. I want to check the missing and unknown here to make sure that combined this is not greater than 2%. The MT30 stat, which is the 30-day status. I did that one already. Oh my gosh, I'm killing it today. Discharge mortality status, the 30-day status, and the MT-OPD. MT-OPD, status at hospital discharge, and 30-day status. So the 30-day status, the MT-OPD, and the status at hospital discharge all need to have the less than 2% missing or unknown. So that's where I would check those fields out at using this report. I don't know if that helps or not, but I hope it does. Melinda, was that helpful, or did I totally just kill it?
Well, that's what I do. I just go in and make sure that none of those things are missing. None of those mortalities, none of the discharge status. Yeah.
We are going to work with IQVIA on providing a more inclusive view of that information. It's something that we're talking about in elaboration to make it a little bit easier for sites. So you kind of have a splash screen that when you log on, you can see this information a little bit more clearly, but it is here, and it's just knowing where to look for it and that. So the next question is do you have a rough estimate of what % of cases have been excluded due to COVID, just as information? Sure. So the last time we looked, which I think was after Harvest 2 of 2021, it was about 2.5% of adult cardiac patients. Next question is, do patients that acquire COVID after hospital discharge, but within 30 days exclude from analysis, are only COVID patients that had COVID before surgery excluded? Currently, any patient who tests positive pre-operatively or post-operatively within 30 days is excluded from analysis. Starting with January 1st, 2022 OR dates, no patients will be excluded after that date going forward. I know Harvest 4 is not a star rating period, but do the mortality thresholds still apply? Can you just confirm this 3-year reporting window yearly in order to determine my missingness? So it is, it will continue to be a 3-year reporting window. I do not believe that your site will be included in analysis if you are missing your site will not be excluded to analysis if you are missing the 2% or higher. So you wouldn't receive analyzed risk adjusted report back. You would probably still receive benchmark data back. All right, Melinda, here we go. I got to find where my slides went.
For the TAVR-SAVR case, will that be first re-up event? No, it will not be a first re-up. We have a whole slide about that. So the TAVR, as again, I talked about, in the training manual now, currently there is some language that talks about if you've had a TAVR and you're going to have an open ABR, then it can be first re-up. But that's for a TAVR that's been in for a while. It's like a special circumstance. It's very difficult to get that TAVR valve out when you go to do an AVR, because you got to get the TAVR valve out before you can put the AVR in. So in this particular situation, it would not be a re-op because the TAVR valve has only been in probably less than 15 minutes, most likely. It really wasn't even in the right place. Remember, we found it at the aortotomy site. So no, we would not count this as a first re-op because same day, same procedure. Even if it had happened the day before, there's really no time for scar tissue to develop. And that's the key. That's the key when you think about the re-op for a TAVR and an ABR, the length of time it's been in and the difficulty getting it out. And so this particular case, it's the first cardiovascular surgery.
Thank you. Thanks, Melinda.
Welcome.
Next question is, my dogs were barking at a delivery man. I hope it was Amazon and it's something good. So I want to confirm no more COVID exclusions for cases with dates of OR dates of 1/1/2022 and forward, but still collect temporary COVID field info. Yes, that's correct, Jean. Please continue to capture the COVID data. We will no longer be excluding cases with OR dates January 1st, 2022 and after. Stephanie's saying they do not participate in anesthesia. However, it shows up on her risk adjusted report and looks like all data is missing. How do I get the report without anesthesia? Stephanie, could you please email me and I can, I want to check into this. I thought that there was something in place that you should not be seeing that, even though you are submitting some of it. So if you could just please email me and I'll put my email in the response to your question spot. Next question, for COVID positive patients being excluded, is there a time frame cutoff of the ones being excluded? Patient had COVID in March, still excluded for surgery done this year. No, those patients will continue to be excluded. Starting with January 1st of 2022, we will no longer exclude patients, but for this time, at this time, the case that you described where the patient was positive in March of 2020, we are still excluding those patients from analysis. Melinda, this is going to be for you. Does the TAVR get captured if there's no sternotomy but put on CPB?
Yeah, and then I see further down, Mary added some more comments. To clarify my first question, the TAVR was reestablished and the left main needed a stent. Is this a required coded patient? Okay, so this sounds like it's just a TAVR. So again, TAVRs are optional. They have their own database. It's called the TVT database from the NCDR and the STS collaborative there. So you do not have to stick a TAVR in the adult cardiac surgery database. Some sites choose to do that, and that's fine. It's optional, and it's the site's choice whether they want to put the TAVRs in both databases or not. They're required to go into TVT database. They're optional to go into our database, regardless of whether they're on bypass or not. Sometimes you have to do a TAVR on bypass.
Great, thanks, Melinda. And this is a tricky question. Tiffany is saying, why are some preoperative medications captured as 24 hours before incision and some are 24 before OR entry?
Yeah, so Tiffany, to answer that question. So you pointed out that the 24 hours of incision is a beta blocker. So I'll address that one first. So beta blocker within 24 hours of incision is a national quality form metric. The reason it is before incision as opposed to before entry is that sort of gives the site a little time to give a beta blocker before the incision to meet that metric. And that does happen at times. That's the way the metric's written. The lipid lowering is 24 hours before OR entry. Again, that's the way the data definition is written. Different data definitions are written for different reasons. So the surgeons want to ensure that a beta blocker is given before incision. As far as lipid lowering, they would like to have a lipid lowering given prior to OR entry within 24 hours. And that's why you see some differences. So each pre-op medication has a time frame, and they may differ slightly. And all those time frames are in the training manual.
Yeah, thanks,
Carol,
Melinda.
do you have anything else to add to that?
No, it's a tricky one. I think it's hard. It's hard to articulate why the beta blocker is so important to give before incision. But I think you said it correctly, is that that patient could even be in the OR if it's an emergent case. They might just be rolling that patient up and emergence, whatever, and giving that beta blocker as the patient's entering the OR, or even in the OR. Sometimes anesthesia may give it. So it could just be, the important thing is that patient has a beta blocker very close to surgery. So it's not, I don't think it's just before 24 hours. I think it's within the 24 hours before the incision is made. The lipid lowering is a little bit more lenient in the time frame. They just want to ensure that the patient's lipids have been addressed. And so I think that's why I think the beta blocker has an acute effect upon the outcome of the surgery, specifically for atrial fibrillation.
Well, and since it's a metric, they're actually giving the surgeon a little bit more time to make up their mind to give that beta blocker.
I agree.
We've got it until prior to incision. So, and as you said, sometimes it's an emergent case, and you don't have to give a beta blocker to an emergent case. I mean, because they're excluded from the metric, but sometimes the patient would benefit from that and they're able to take it, and so it can be given. So,
yep, totally agree with you, Melinda. Thank you. Okay, Lisa's saying, just want to confirm COVID positive patients with date of surgery of April 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2021 will be included and added back into future STS analysis. No, those patients will continue to be excluded. We are going to start including those patients, the COVID positive patients, starting with OR dates of January 1st, 2022. So the previous patients, previous OR dates prior to January 1st, 2022, will still have those patients excluded from analysis. Next question. If emergent case and dissection TAVR gone bad considered planned, when would cases be considered unplanned? That's usually in the OR. That happens in the OR.
Yeah, like you have an oopsie in the OR. Oh, sorry, I perforated your LV. I better fix it. That's an unplanned LV repair.
Yeah.
That's generally when your unplanned procedures occur.
Right.
If you're going into the OR with a plan to fix something, that's a planned procedure. As opposed to, oh gosh, I'm already in the OR and hey, wait a minute, I got to fix something that I didn't realize. So it was either a complication or it was some unsuspected anatomy that you have to fix. That's most often when you find unplanned cases.
Thank you. I agree. It's usually what's on the consent before the patient enters the OR, and then you could say that what's not on the consent is unplanned if that something happens. All right, Melinda, get your thinking cap on. Please provide clarification on the general concepts of valve disease. On page 87 of the manual, it states, for pre-op valve regurgitant stenosis, parent fields, if you have no documentation of any regurgitation or stenosis, code no. Does this mean if a valve is documented as no or trace regurg insufficiency, but there is no mention of stenosis or morphology, we choose no to stenosis and no to disease? I don't think that's what that means.
Okay, so when you look at the data collection form,
Let me bring it over.
yeah, when you look at that, just go like, I think it's 1817, I think will get us close.
Well, we could
Okay.
do aortic. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at the data collection form, the first field under all the valves really is regurgitation. So in this particular case, you would say yes to regurgitation because there is regurgitation documented, right? I see that, trace regurgitation. So then you would go down to stenosis. That would be your next field. And you have no documentation of stenosis. So if you have no documentation of stenosis, you will code no. Because if there was stenosis, the surgeon would have documented it or the echo person would have documented it. So the answer is no. Do not code yes and open it up and put not documented, okay? The reason we have that child field under that is, let's say you have aortic stenosis, but you don't know the degree of the stenosis. They didn't tell you if it was mild, moderate, or severe. Then you would choose not documented. But if you've got no documentation of any stenosis anywhere in your record before the surgery, then you would say no to stenosis. Now, as far as disease goes, aortic valve disease is defined as either stenosis or regurgitation of mild, moderate, or severe. So in this particular scenario, Tiffany, you only have trace regurgitation. You don't have stenosis, so you don't have disease.
Very good, Melinda. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So if a TAVR, I know we're going to get these questions. So if the TAVR is greater than 24 hours, would it be first re-op?
Well, I guess it depends on when, is it at 24 hours? Is it 48 hours? Is it 6 months from now? Is it 1 year? The concept is, that I need for you guys to understand is that the reason we allow for it to be a first re-op when you have a TAVR and you do an AVR is because of the development of scar tissue and the difficulty of getting the valve out. So a valve that's only been in 24 hours or 25 hours is probably not going to add any risk to the AVR. There's going to be no scar tissue there. And I'm going to leave it at that. I think that's kind of an unusual situation if this were to happen. But in my mind, and as the surgeons say, the reason that we're allowing it to be coded as a re-op is because of the difficulty of getting that scarred valve out.
Thanks, Melinda.
Welcome. We already did Mary's.
Yeah. Michelle saying she doesn't think the COVID patients were removed. I think that if you could just email IQVIA, they'll be able to check into that for you, into that for you and let you know, because they have the data from DCRI. And let me find where the you can email them at ststechsupport@iqvia.com, and they'll be able to check into that for you, Michelle. So we know the explant of a prior historical TAVR we code as first re-op because of risk associated with a device that has been in there for some time. This we code as first re-op because it was just placed in same visit, correct?
No,
Or
we
first
don't.
op, sorry, I said it incorrectly. This we code as first op because it was placed in the same visit, correct?
First op, correct. Yes, first op. So in this scenario that we presented, it's going to be first op because that TAVR valve was just deployed. There's no scar tissue developed. And so we're going to code it as first re-op. First op. Gosh, now my tongue is getting tired.
No, I apologize. We were on a very long upgrade call for congenital, and I think it took all of my brain power away. But maybe I don't have any usually, but my brain, like what's coming in my mind doesn't want to come out of my mouth. Patty's asking, is the goal of coding TAVR gone bad as isolated SAVR for composites, etc.?
Yeah, that's it. We want this to, like I said, the TAVR is not required to go into our database. They have their own database. The AVR, the SAVR is required, and it is an analyzed procedure. Carol, do you have anything else to add?
I think, well, the only thing I would add is that the purpose of, I think that that's exactly right, Patty. And I think what you said is exactly right. Also, Melinda, the idea is that the SAVRs are what we collect in our database. And so we want these procedures because they're considered index procedures, and we have composites for them, risk modeling and things like that. The idea of the reason why I think why we don't want the TAVR case, which is captured in TVT registry, is because we want that TAVR case is already entered. So we already technically have that part of the procedure captured somewhere, even though it's not the adult cardiac database. The site has already abstracted that data. And now we need to see what happens with the rest of the patient stay and get more detailed information on that SAVR so we can understand those patients a little bit better, the TAVR gone bad patients a little bit better, and how their outcomes are related to the SAVR, the other SAVR population where they may not be entering the OR with a failed procedure. So I think that there's two things there, is that we do risk adjust for the SAVRs, and also I think we want to understand the population a little bit more. I see Sima and Lori have hand raised. I don't know if their hands are raised because they were singing along to Bon Jovi, but I'm going to delete, see, literally cannot talk. Ask Lori to unmute, and if she would allow, if she'd like to say something, feel free to go ahead. You just have to unmute on your side, Lori. And Sima, the same thing. Are either of you there? Sima?
Yeah, it was raised from the music.
Oh, okay. All right, good. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Carol.
You too. Bye, Sima. Okay. Okay. Next question, for the substance abuse counseling, can it be moved to be a child question to the parent question of screening? So it's not answering a two-part question with a single response. So actually the reason why we have to do that is, the reason why it has to be one question is because the NQF measure, which I have a little question about, I'm waiting on a little bit more clarity because it looks like something's going on with that NQF measure through NQF. But this NQF measure was designed to be a two-part measure, which includes the screening and the counseling. So that's why it's asked that way. It's a good question, and I wish we could do it because I agree it would make more sense to do it as two separate questions. But there was a reason why it was made into one. And I think we're getting close to time. We have quite a few questions here. I'm going to see, Melinda, are you available maybe for the next 15 minutes?
Yeah. Yep.
On the ACSD risk adjusted report, a dashboard for the quality ratings, if the patient had both an exclusion for the pre-op and an exclusion for discharge meds, should I see that they were removed from eligible procedure denominations for medications? Yes, you should. IQVIA is looking into an issue, with that right now, looking at the data that came over from DCRI. So Bonnie, if you could please submit that to IQVIA help desk at ACSD tech support at IQVIA.com. They'll be able to put that in the list of things to check. Melissa's saying, thank you for reviewing the missing status process. To assess each category type for each rolling 12-month timeframes involves a very high number of clicks for the user every time they want to check missingness rates. Can we request a more automated display? Yeah, so that's what, and same thing for general thoracic and same thing for congenital. That is something that we are talking to IQVIA about, and hopefully will be a future enhancement with something where you just log in and you're able to see that information very clearly. And hopefully that will be more helpful and comes soon in the future. Dear Santa, a one-click report summarizing those 3 mortality fields by PROC type and year would be great. And I will pass this on and hope that Santa can bring us that gift this year. So it is not per year, it's part years for 2% missing. So it's actually rolling 12 months. So for the 36-month composite, you have to look at the 3 12-month periods that make up that 36-month composite. So for harvest 1 of 2022, you're going to look at January 1st through December 31st of 2019, January 1st through December 31st of 2020, and January 1st through December 31st of 2021. So each 12 months that go into that 36-month composite. How can I find the total case count for like groups in the risk adjusted report? I see only the regional count. This was also another issue that IQVIA is checking into because there was some, for some reason, there was some blank data showing where it's just dashes. And it is something they were investigating. I don't know if that was on Steve's list or not, but we talked with Melanie about it earlier this week. Can you please point out in the dashboard where to locate the antibiotic dosing timing discontinuation? Should be in the operative section, but was unable to locate it. I don't think it's there. I think it's on one of our upcoming elaborations that that we have been discussing. And I'm fairly certain it's not there. Let's see if I can find it really quick here to show you. But yeah, that's exactly where it should be. Are we in the, oh, which report are you looking at? Let me know which report, Maureen, I'll pull it up for you. That is occurring at my facilities also in regards to anesthesia component. We do not participate. Elizabeth, if you could please email me and I'll have to reach out to IQVIA to check on that. I want to have a specific conversation because I thought we had something in place for sites who do not participate in anesthesia. Would you consider on the CAB composite fallout reports to give an event percent for the morbidities in addition to the percent of failures? It's hard to figure out the actual percent of a morbidity, especially for the 3-year report when the indicator is only the percent that event occurred in relation to all events. So I think if you're, Chris, if you're looking on the risk adjusted dashboard report, and I might not be understanding your question, if you're looking on the risk adjusted dashboard report, oh, I understand. Right, so we reported out, the way that we report it out now is over the total number of patients who had a morbidity following. So it's that morbidity over the total number of morbidities. We both ways are correct to report it out. This is the way that the STS surgeon leadership had asked for us to report it out, where it's the percent of the morbidity. But if you'd like to submit that to IQVIA, we can definitely talk about it in an elaboration call and see if we can find a way to report out both. If you could email your suggestion to the tech support, ACSD tech support at IQVIA.com. I'm sorry if I missed this at the beginning. If COVID patients are no longer being excluded, will there be any risk assigned to these patients? So the risk will be assigned in the risk, in the current risk factors that we are collecting for these patients. For the clarification for the mortality threshold, is it less than 2% per procedure or overall? It's for the specific procedure. So for CABG, you have to have 2% or less. For AVRs, it has to be 2% or less. For CABG AVRs, it has to be 2% or less. Will we be receiving scores for medications on the STS composite CABG composite quality rating report? Star rating is there, but not the scores, confidence intervals, and percentiles. It should be there. So if you're not seeing it, if you could please email IQVIA tech support. There was an issue with Spotfire, who is the platform that the dashboards are built on. There was a problem with Spotfire and it had gone down on Friday, and it was restored over the weekend, but there was still some strange things were still happening that I've seen. So Amy, if you could please email that in if that's happening at your site. IQVIA will be the best people to help you with that. Patient tested positive for COVID in December and had surgery in January. Would this positive COVID case now be included in our statistics? Yes, that's correct. So if we have surgery in January, no matter what, when COVID positive, the data would be included. Yes, that's correct. We're only looking at OR dates now. We're just looking at the OR date. So if it's the OR date is January 1st, 2022 and after, regardless of COVID status, those patients will be included in analysis. What about the PFO that is found in the OR on intra-op TEE and the surgeon closes the PFO? Unplanned due to unsuspected disease? Question mark.
Yes, that would be unplanned due to unsuspected disease.
Thank you. Can you share the rationale for the change in excluding COVID positive cases beginning in January 2022? The surgeons felt that it was time to no longer exclude these patients because the hospital systems seem to have gotten over the, I don't know, I don't want to use the word, I don't want to use wrong words here, but they feel that the hospital systems have evolved enough to be caring for these patients and to have plans in place that that they no longer are as negatively impacted by COVID patients as they were in the past regarding resources and things like that. Additionally, they felt that with the rate of vaccination and protection by a previous infection, that the patients are now not as sick as they had been in the past from COVID.
Oh, and we also looked at some data that we had collected when in the meeting that really did not show much difference between the COVID positive patient outcomes and the other non-COVID positive patient outcomes. So they looked at data, and in addition, the other thing that there had been many requests from data managers to look at this and this exclusion and to review it. So I think that was a lot of our drive was to, there was a concern that data managers were losing patients in their numerators and denominators. And so we took that, all of that stuff was taken into effect. And the surgeons spent a lot of time reviewing this. It wasn't just one meeting, it was several meetings.
Yeah, it was quite a few meetings. And also, I think it was difficult for them to determine a cutoff time frame for preoperative infections. and that the infections vary so much, the way that patients are impacted from COVID infections. So yeah, there is quite a bit of discussion and quite a large number of things to consider making this decision. And thanks, Melinda, for bringing up that they also reviewed the data, which is very important. Next question: with recent research regarding benefits of aspirin, there has been discussion about prescribing it at discharge, particularly in isolated cabbage. Thus, if there is documentation reason for not prescribing aspirin as antiplatelet therapy, such as no antiplatelet therapy as patients receiving NOAC, would this be an acceptable contraindication? Does it matter what is documented as the reason?
Well, that's an acceptable contraindication. The patient is receiving NOAC, so they don't want the patient to go on aspirin. The contraindication needs to be for a medical reason, unless, of course, the patient refuses to take the medication. Then if it's clearly documented, patient refusal can be documented as contraindicated too in version 4.2. So this is clearly a medical reason. The patient's receiving NOAC. So yes, that's an acceptable contraindication.
Yeah, thank you. We have a cabbage patient that had an exploratory brachial artery procedure to retrieve a guide wire that got stuck while they were placing an A-line. Do we capture this as something?
Well,
If so, what? Thanks.
well, I don't know. I don't know because I don't know when they did this procedure. Was that during the cabbage or was that after the post-op? Or Tabitha, why don't you send that into the mailbox and I'll with some more information. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, during cab, she says.
Oh, during cab. Well, during I'd probably have to look at it. I mean, that's something, again, when we start talking about other procedures done during cabbages, we have to look at how the other procedure impacts the risk of the index procedure. So depending on what they had to do to get that wire out, it would depend, honestly. I hate that's a bad answer, but I mean, if they had to do a huge vascular procedure to get it out, of course, yeah, we're going to code that as another procedure. But if that was just a minor little, oh, we can go ahead and pull this out real quick, then we probably wouldn't code that because we would want it. It wouldn't be impacting the risk of the cabbage.
Right. Thanks, Melinda. I'm going to do, so there's two questions here about the IQVIA platform. I'm going to get to those in 1 second. If the TAVR case goes bad, all of the data should be included in the TB registry for simplicity. So they do capture if the patient has to undergo an emergent SAVR in the TVT registry, but the data that we collect in the adult cardiac can't be duplicated over into the TVT registry because we want all of our SAVR patients together. So we want to analyze these patients all together, and we want to understand this population better. That's why we need to do that.
Well, I think she did make a good point. Sometimes there's two different people abstracting. And so I think you need to communicate. If you are at a site where your TVT registry manager is not in your office or even or down the hall or 3 cubbies down, y'all probably need to communicate as to did any of her cases end up being SAVRs, so that you make sure that you get all the cases that you need to put in the STS registry.
I agree. And I do know that on the ACC side, they do education. And this is one of those things that they do educate on. So I'll mention this again to Joan at ACC just to make sure that maybe we can do a joint education session for TVT and STS ACSD database managers. That might be helpful. Okay, Maury, you were talking about the antibiotic timing, and it should be, you're right, it should be in the operative section. And you're probably correct that it's not here. So I would say if you could please, I believe that this came through earlier as something that we were going to add for an elaboration call. As you know, we all started with basic reporting. and we add things. The plan was to add more things. We start with basic reporting just so we could get the platform up and running and start getting reports out to sites, with the intent that we were going to make that this was going to be ever evolving. So as we are evolving, we want to get feedback, things that are missing, things that sites are expecting to see reported that we aren't currently reporting. It could even be things that we never reported before that now are going to be helpful. So if you could just please submit this to the STS tech support at IQVIA.com, we'll put that in the list of things to discuss for future elaboration. We only capture our TVT and the NCDR if the STS ACSD abstractor goes through the patient's chart. Shouldn't say they see clearly if the SAVR patient is a failed TAVR. And yet that's a good point, Carrie, because they really should be checking the OR logs, what's coming, what's scheduled, what happened the day before, or however you're abstracting, if you're abstracting in real time or if you're a week out and abstracting. There should be some method at your site for the ACSD abstractor to identify those SAVR patients. Can you do a quick demo on how to pull the latest harvest report? So when you log in under operational reports, go to the ACSD risk adjusted dashboard. The last report that came out is harvest 3, which is June 30th. And there is discussion. One of the things that came from the surgeon leaders is to add the harvest numbers after these dates, just so it's a little bit easier. June 30th is harvest 3 data. So just that's the most recent one. Apply parameters. And then the risk adjusted report will come out. You'll have your star ratings, your composite scores, breakdown of the composite scores, your NQF measures. Let's see if this is going to pull up for us. Risk adjusted and regional outcomes benchmarked reports, and your anesthesia report if you participate. Those sites who are not participating in anesthesia but still seeing a report there, please reach out to email me and let me know so I can work with IQVIA on that and figure out why you're still seeing that. So under quality ratings, this is your star ratings. This is the details of those star ratings. And then the risk adjusted is your risk adjusted reports. There's ways to print as well, which is you can export it to PDF, PowerPoint, or Excel. Try the PDF, and there's different settings in there to help with that. I hope that was okay. I had to do quick. Okay, this is going to be the last question, and then we're going to go. It says COVID patients are excluded from January 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. I think we actually starting excluded these patients from March 1st of 2020. We put out notifications to start collecting this data. They were not excluded from Harvest 2 of 2020. We did exclude them from Harvest 3 of 2020, which was April 1st OR dates. It'll be April 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. Okay, we're going to end there. Thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate it. Happy holidays to everybody. Have a happy and safe new year. And I hope you all get to spend time with your family and loved ones and get some time off to relax. It's been a long year. So thanks everybody. And we'll talk again in January. Thank you, Melinda, for all your time and all your help and with the database. And thanks to all of our IQVIA guests and my friends at STS. So happy holidays and
happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Happy holidays. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.
bye, everybody.